Hi, I'm Monica Olson.
And I'm Jennifer Walsh.
And you're listening to the Biophilic Solutions Podcast, where every other week we sit down with experts and thought leaders in order to explore the innate connection between humans and nature and why we need nature to thrive.
We truly believe that reconnecting with the natural world and understanding our place within nature is a key to tackling the global environmental problems we face today.
So let's get to today's episode.
Hey, Monica.
Hey, Jennifer.
So, Monica, today we're exploring the politics of nature, particularly around issues of belonging. I'm a passionate advocate for the benefits of nature, but it's important that we occasionally take a step back and ask ourselves, who has access to nature and who feels like they belong in nature?
Absolutely. And, as we navigate this conversation, we're really lucky to be joined by Erin Sharkey. She's a writer and an arts and abolition organizer, a cultural worker and film producer based in Minneapolis. She's most recently the editor of an anthology, A Darker Wilderness, Black Nature Writing from Soil to Stars. Now, this is personal essays that she's curated together with archival objects, which is super cool. So each essay has an object attached to it with Black history and memory included. And this collection explores the complex relationships between Black Americans and the natural world. And the themes are land ownership, self-determination, healing, and nature writing as a discipline.
Also fascinating. And one of the reviews we read as we were prepping for this interview stated that nature is brilliantly defined and redefined in a darker wilderness, and that couldn't be more true.
I agree. So let's get to our conversation with Erin Sharkey.
Erin, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to get to know y'all and chat about the book.
Yeah, your work is incredible. And I was also doing a little Instagram stalking. And so I saw the amazing piece that you just installed at the Rochester Art Museum. And I know that wasn't even in, but I really want to find out about that. And I'll tell the listeners about it. So the Rochester Art Museum's in Rochester, New York. I don't know much about the museum.
In Minnesota, actually. Rochester, Minnesota.
Minnesota. Okay. Look at me. Okay, so we're going to have to cut that. Rochester, Minnesota. And, with bird glass, right, there's this huge thing that we've talked about on the podcast before. If you don't have bird safe glass, I should say, sadly, we lose many, 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 many birds here because they just run into buildings. Anyway, so I'm going to tee that up for you. And you put a poem on the glass, which is so cool.
Yeah, so the Rochester Art Museum reached out to me through another artist who was doing some graphic design for the bird safe glass. They really wanted to, they have two big 3 stories of glass on the building. And they wanted to commission a poem that they could put up there that had some themes around birds and migration, but also around, to be in dialogue with people walking past and driving past. And Rochester is the home of the Mayo Clinic. And so lots and lots of visitors to that area. And it's a quick 1.5-hour drive from the Twin Cities. So it's fun to be able to go down and see it installed. And I don't tell this to everybody, so just to you and your podcast listeners, but I have a bird phobia, and I've had it since I slept in a crib. My earliest nightmares were about birds, and my mom's 2-word phrase was bad duck. It creates like a real fear in me.
Sure.
And so when they first asked me, I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. But the thing I am scared of most is small dead birds. So I thought,
no.
So it was a fun project to sort of contemplate my fear and why I have that fear. And and so some of the themes in the poem have to do with change and thinking about things in multiple ways. That glass can be a passageway, can also be a hard wall, So it was fun to write it.
Yeah, and I just thought it was so cool because we've talked about it, and a lot of times it's just like dots or the glass has a certain little etching in it. And the artist you worked with did a really cool, the other side of the building. But I thought, God, that was kind of brilliant to do a poem, not even just words, but a poem. So I don't know. I'm putting it out there that everybody should do poems on
Wait, have you gotten over the bird phobia though? Now I'm super curious.
I've done lots of healing and work that in that space. And
Got it.
at our retreat center, we have a little gaggle of chickens and guineas, and I feel fondly about them, and I'm able to be near them. Yeah, it's I've grown a lot, but still, I
Amazing.
don't think I'll be cuddly with birds, and I don't think they
Yeah.
want that either. So I think
No.
we're okay.
No.
Baby
No.
steps.
Okay.
Baby steps.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Exactly.
before we I know because I'm glad you asked that, Monica. That's so interesting. Well, I know there's so much to talk about because Monica and I've been so excited for you to be on the podcast, and Katrina, we've all been chatting about all of your work. So, can you give us a little bit more about your background and what you've done up to this point? I know it's a lot, but just like little snippets of how you got here.
Yeah. So I've been plagued since I was a child with too many good ideas. I'm like an innovator and ideator by nature. So I've done lots of kinds of work. I love to think of creative solutions to problems I see in the world. So I've worked some in local politics. When I was a young adult, I worked for Paul Wellstone here in Minnesota before his passing. And then I moved to upstate New York and I worked there on an urban farm with a bunch of teenagers. And we were doing some economic development and some neighborhood planning using the garden, the farm as a centerpiece for that. And then I came back here to Minnesota about 10 years after I moved to New York, and I have my MFA in creative writing from Hamline University. And right now, I spend my time as a professor of English at Minneapolis College here in the Twin Cities. And I also am a coordinator with a project called the Reentry Lab, which is a new initiative of the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop. It's a new collaborative project
Wow.
thinking about all of our incredible students who've been writing and learning about writing inside prison, who are now coming home from incarceration. The vast majority of people who are incarcerated will come home. And so we're organizing the arts and cultural community here in the Twin Cities to better receive people home. So we're thinking about opportunities, but also like, do you have room in your book club for another person? Or someone's coming home, they really need a mattress and a laptop. And then the community can work together to respond
Wow.
to their needs. And we just think like the more connections people have in community, the more ways that they see the community as a resource and as a folks that are rooting for them, the
Mm-hmm.
better we all do. So yeah, I'm working right now on one of our former students who we met inside is now home, and she's going to be doing a writing workshop through the month of December. And so I'm
Incredible.
that.
Do you find, because that's a really interesting, the prison system and getting people to write, I would think that it would be very cathartic for them and just a wonderful way to express what they've gone through or memories or their future hopes and dreams. How did you get involved with that?
Yeah. So I many pathways led me there.
Yeah.
In my MFA program, I'm working on a memoir. I've been working on it now for 10 years or so. We'll see if it ever meets the light of day. But in that process, I really wanted to understand better more about my father, who wasn't in my life when I was a child. There are many reasons for that, but one of the reasons is that he was incarcerated for a period of time as a kid. So I wanted to better understand incarceration, and I've been someone thinking about abolition and about other
Mm,
pathways for preventing incarceration or for supporting folks who have experienced crime, and to think about healing, think about the way that the carceral system doesn't actually really do much to heal with us.
mhm.
There's a new program when I was in my MFA called the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop that was creating correspondence between writers inside with writers outside to get and so I asked if I could work with them and take writing classes inside, and so I've been doing that now for 9 years. It's
Wow.
my favorite kind of teaching. I really think that there's something. The folks that choose to be writers inside are particularly thoughtful. They're motivated by their own desire to understand better, to understand themselves better, to communicate better, and they really support each other. So there's a really incredible communities of writers inside who are reading each other's work, who are celebrating each other, who are
Incredible.
encouraging people to submit. So here in Minnesota, there's many people I work with inside who have published books in the last few years, who are creating anthologies. They just published a new collection called American Precariat, Parables of Exclusion, which is an incredible
Wow.
and I'd encourage y'all to read it and share with your listeners. But it's got incredible essays by some of the best nonfiction writers around. But each of those essays was selected by a panel of people who are incarcerated, and then they also published a conversation between the editors, the group
Mm-hmm.
of people who edited the collection for each of the essays. So really great teaching tool. I'm using it this semester for the first time, and it has really great essays around student loan debt, around addiction, around the refugee experience, around folks that experience that precarity of social experience, social class in the U.S. A real good range of essays.
Yeah, I think we're recording this in November, so we've passed the election, and that's not really what we ever talk about. But I do think with everything that's gone on, it's so important to understand, get into other people's heads and really understand where they're coming from, especially marginalized groups. We all, doesn't matter what our background is, what our skin color is, like, get in our own bubble. And so Jen and I were actually talking earlier that really trying to think about amplifying voices and doing better storytelling. I mean, I think we do good storytelling, but just really thinking about how we can amplify stories and experiences in a better way, like use our voice and platform to do that. And so I like that suggestion. Thank you for that book. And it's actually a perfect segue, because you talked about an anthology.
Talk about stories. Yeah.
Exactly. Into your writing and your curating or editorial for this. So talk to us a little bit about a darker wilderness and how you came to conceptualize that. Where did it come from? And then a little bit further in is you also have objects attached to the storytelling. And so why objects? How did that come into play as well?
So it's actually right from the very start. Objects were always a part of my imagination about this project. So it really came at this perfect intersection of a class I was teaching with Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop about nature writing class. And then I also had a residency through Coffee House Press at it's called the Anderson Library, which is at the University of Minnesota. And they have a collection called the Givens Collection of African American Literature. And it's an incredible archive of really amazing books and correspondence and ephemera and records and CDs, and just an amazing collection of things. And the residency really had me just let my curiosity lead me. They were like, you can do whatever you want with this time.
So cool.
Let one object lead me to the next object, to the next object. And I wanted to read, there's a collection of unpublished ex-slave narratives that were part of the Federal Works Commission during the Depression. And so there's a box that is full of this like very brittle, dry, curling paper. They've also digitized it, so I could read it on the screen.
Yeah.
To read the first person experiences of people who survived enslavement in this country. And the box that they have at Minnesota is actually from a place in Mississippi that is near where my family is from in Mississippi. That was part of what attracted me to it. And I think there's probably 12 narratives in that box, and they each were taken by the same interviewer. So I don't know much about that person, but it's possible that the synergy that I felt throughout the collection of those stories had to do with her questions. But what I felt after just reading 2 or 3 of them is that it was the first time I had thought that they're talking about a garden differently than the field. So I'd never imagined what, I had imagined what an enslaved person's relationship with toil and cotton fields and that sort of garden represented a place where their auntie grew the best tomatoes, or that their uncle could shoot a terrapin and they made stew from it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the first person account I'd read that felt like there was some autonomy, some pride, well-deserved feeling of ownership around and that sort of experience. So that led me to think about gardens, because I've worked on a garden in New York and I love gardens. I think they're incredible, especially when they are community spaces, are really incredible conveners of people and ideas and cultural traditions and practice. And so then I started to look at garden club roles during the Reconstruction period, and that moving into the Jim Crow South, like how did people organize themselves around garden clubs? And then I was looking at, other historical papers around sharecropping. And so this idea that the archive could provide us proof of Black folks' relationship to nature and the way that it persisted despite the ways in which the state and government and racism and stuff created barriers for that connection. There are ways that folks were able to continue to steward public spaces. So when I met with Milkweed around this project, at the start it was that I wanted to talk about nature as a political space, and that but also about the archive, and that the archive is not neutral. It is dependent on the imagination of the people who have the resources to be archivists. So sometimes you have to engage in a different kind of imagination when you are interacting with the archive. It's sort of a humanity-filled, a fleshy human kind of imagination, where sometimes you have to fill in the blanks around some of those things. So I was thinking I could go to my favorite writers. I could ask my favorite poets and essayists to start with that prompt. What is your own relationship to nature? And how could you create a conversation with an archival object that emphasizes the historical significance of our relationships with nature? So that's at the start. And I asked Michael Cleaver Diggs is one of the first writers I asked. And and then I got brave and I asked some people that I didn't know, but I was a huge fan of. And it was such an incredible process to be there through the creation of the essays. Sometimes anthologies come together and you pick essays you really like already and you
right
into a group. But it was awesome to be able to sort of court a writer by saying, here's some cool objects I thought maybe intersects with your work or with a place you care about that I know about because I love your work or we're friends or something. Start from the ideation process with them around like what could it be, and through all the steps of the writing and editing process. It was a real honor to see it come together.
And Erin, like I love that you saying all this, because what a thread I kept feeling is like there's such story to the land, there's such story to the spaces that we often just we don't think about it because we're just going about our day doing whatever it is. But every piece of land has a story and a history. And if only we took the time to do like what you did, and that set of like exploration and discovery and wonderment of like, wow, there's so many like, there's so many things that are tied to that one little piece of whatever that is, whether it be a park or someone's yard. And there's so many things that have happened, and then from that you pull like the stories of the lives of people that were touched there, and that's opens up a whole new world of like, again, like, wow, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it's exciting because then you learn the fabric of the country and why, why they're there and who's there, and the things that they felt, and it really then draws others like us back to that space of wanting to learn more. And it's really powerful. It's a very powerful tool.
Thank you. Yeah, and everyone has a relationship to place.
Yes.
Whether we somewhere a long time or somewhere, just recently arrived there. And it is a way of connecting too with the generations of people who've lived there, how they've cared for it, the sort of thought they put into it, but also the ways in which our country has to contend with some weird laws, some weird policies that were in place that I think that just because you take away redlining or your town is no longer a sundowner town, it doesn't mean that the remnants of that aren't still coursing through the bodies of people that live in those places. So our relationships with places, and they are, they're rich and varied. And so I had the same experience when I was editing. I was like, oh my gosh, like things are coming together. There's so many cool threads that I can see between the essays, and it was fun to
beautiful
with each other too.
Well, and one of the big themes, and I'm fascinated with this, is land ownership, right? And obviously very different from the Black experience to the white male landowner traditionally. Women couldn't even own land until somewhat recently.
Yep.
And we forget, right? We kind of joke that like people have amnesia, but really history is so important. And if you don't seek history out or be curious, then you don't understand, like, how did we get here? So talk a little bit about land ownership. And I know, there was a couple of different comments about, just different people have different relationships. sometimes you don't I mean, not even sometimes, you don't have to own the land to have a special relationship with it. But we put so much emphasis on that.
Yeah.
Just to talk about that theme.
Yeah, so I was inspired in creating this book by Carolyn Finney's work. And so she was one of the first people I asked if she would be interested in being part of this dialogue. And she graciously offered to write the foreword, the preface to the book, because her work is really around how much deep and strong her family's relationship is to a piece of land that they never had ownership over. Her parents were caretakers of some property, and they lived there 50 years, I think, a very long time. And there were very sacred places on the land that they had cared for and marked their significant moments and the growth of their children and important parts of their lives. And once the ownership shifted to someone new, they no longer had access to those important places, but also there was no continuation of the deep, rich history that they had with the land and the expertise they had with the land, as much as anyone can have expertise with nature, because it's a slippery beast. But her work was so inspiring, and so it did lead to me thinking about what other objects might help us think about people's relationship to land. And so bringing Sean Hill into the project and his essay is really around someone earning their own personal freedom or their own liberation through service to the military. There's an essay by Glenn Pugh around her family's ownership of some retreats. And so we got to think about the history of Black folks in tourism and the way they navigated this country. I think about Michael Kleber Diggs's essay around his grandparents. And I love how like slow and thoughtful his writing is around their daily activities in their own space, right? They grew the food in their yard. He's thinking about all of the slow movements of a particular generation that had that had a different kind of relationship with the cadences of nature and that sort of thing. So yeah, the essays in the collection do think about land. I'm, in my own relationship with land, because in the process of writing the book, my wife and I and a couple of friends formed a cooperative, and we purchased some property that had been stewarded for a time by a group of nuns as a spiritual retreat center. And the nuns were looking towards retirement, and they had a couple that was caretaking the land for them. And they gave us a great opportunity to step up into ownership. And so it gave us like a rent to own arrangement and gave us some time to raise the money. But yeah, so we've owned Rootsprings Cooperative now for 4 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's 36 acres of land in central Minnesota. We have 3 little cabins that people can rent for themselves, for family, for a group that wants to come and quilt for the weekend, or if they want to come and write, that sort of thing. We have a wellness center on the land, like a central building that has a sauna and a commercial kitchen and a cute little, we built a library that you can climb up inside and actually sleep. It has a bed inside of the middle of the library. It's really cool. But yeah, so it has a little lake, it has walking trails, and it is a thing that has really changed my personal relationship with nature and my relationship with other folks in nature, because it feels like such a gift to caretake a place that people come to rest, to spend time with their family. Being in Minnesota, up north culture is real strong. So most people gather around a water cooler at work and they talk about their cabins. But that's not an experience that everyone has in Minnesota. A lot of folks don't have a cabin to go to. So it's one of those unspoken sorts of barriers between cultural groups here. Is like many people have, a cabin that's been in their family for 2 or 3 generations, and they spend the weekends there, and it creates a different sort of community culture. And we wanted to create a space that folks could start to think of as their cabin, start to come regularly. And it's been so fun to have a group of people that I get to see over and over again. We're seeing their kids grow up, and
that's so beautiful.
It's
like that intentionality, I think. And community. It's that intention you're getting from the book that you're also living in your own life. I'm sorry, Monica, didn't mean to interrupt you. I get so excited.
Just the communing, like you were saying, like the communing of in nature. And we could do that solo, and that can be very rewarding and nourishing. But to come together with people is just magical. And then you're building your own sense of place. And I think the theme of land ownership, of like, obviously who owns it and how these things work. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is, sort of the historical connection of how we've treated nature. And we can go into all sorts of areas there, but I thought one was interesting is sort of that it sort of started out, or not started out, but like in the, I guess we would say colonization, we're cataloging everything, right? We want to catalog it. We want to categorize it. We want to understand it, and we can put it in this little box, and that explains it. And I think that that's an interesting, that nature writing sort of started there, maybe. And so really thinking about how it's so much more than that, and moving out of that sort of, I don't know what you'd call, it's like a scientific classification, or like black and white, like we're just like, this is that, and this is that, and this is how we're going to put them into these genus and classifications. But how we're really, it's this emotional rather than the rational that I really, really loved. So tell me a little bit about like, in the, when you've had people to the retreat, like you've got it 4 years now. So let's see, 24, this is through the pandemic when you bought it. How did that change you, and have you changed thinking about nature? Because I know Jen and I talk a lot about, COVID and the pandemic, I think really woke a lot of people up from, we need nature, we need people, we need these safe spaces to be able to walk, green space. How did it change for you, your relationship to buy it in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah, well, it gets even more complicated because we bought it in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the uprising here in Minnesota. And so the questions around the experience of Black people in Minnesota, and that was really at the forefront, and lots of people were talking about it. And we could also see how people were really burning out and stressing out, and folks who have been working in, adjacent to the Black Lives Matter community in Minnesota for years and years, we could see how it was there was a toil on their bodies, on their relationships. And so the idea of creating a space where could center people of color and queer folks in retreating felt like a gift to us and the community. And so for me, I'm a very busy person. I told you about a few of my projects, but I got other stuff.
I know. We're going to have to get to those.
I know about burnout. I know about that experience. And I also know what a gift nature can be to recenter me, to recalibrate my nervous system. And we were thinking about how a lot of folks could leave the city, could go out to their cabins, could weather the pandemic from a space that they had a little bit more room, where they had a little bit more opportunity to get out of the confines of their place. And we could see it happening across the country. People were leaving New York City to move upstate. And, we could see that happening. And so it was awesome to be able to say, we have a place. And, to remember that not everyone has a feeling of safety, a feeling of positivity towards nature.
Yep. Yep.
It also was about creating a safe space for people to practice retreat for the first time, maybe, or for, so we don't assume everyone knows what to do when they come out to nature.
Yeah.
So that's been part of it too, is to think about how we don't want to overprogram it or be in people's faces, but also create like options for people to try. So yeah, it created an opportunity for us to fundraise in Minnesota that allowed us to, and I think back to the idea of ownership, buying it as a cooperative. It was like a different model, and it is emphasizing a different kind of relationship we want to have to the land. And we want to have it from the start. It is something we intend to share with people and tend to create more room for people to be in relationship with it. So yeah, that's been really cool. And
the word that keeps coming is gift. Like, I feel like it's a gift. The nuns provided you this opportunity. It's a gift. You then are in turn sharing it with other people as a gift. And I think you're right. Nature isn't always safe space for various reasons, and or people don't have an understanding, or they're just not familiar with it. So it's scary, right? Whether that's a bird or a snake or a, we don't, whatever, there's bugs or dirt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it's like, exposure is super important, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like education, curiosity, history. But tell me a little bit, because I as we're talking, you haven't used the word privilege, but in my head, I'm like, it's a privilege. People are privileged, and is there a better word? Because I wanted to say it, but you weren't saying it. But I'm like, but that feels to be like it's a privilege for somebody to have a cabin to retreat to, or have the ability, the access to go retreat, whether that's a financial or a knowledge, if somebody's sharing it with you. Is there a better word that we can use?
Words are so slippery.
Because it's sort of caught up, right? It's become a little politicized. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but it's like, it feels like it's a hot button word. And I'm like, oh my God, can we just talk? Like, I don't want the words to I want to like, but I don't know if there's a better word to use. It's not access.
I mean, I think it is about access for sure. It's about, I've been trying to think about, how to change the narratives around these sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing some facilitation with a group, and I was talking about, we were thinking about access in lots of ways, but I was thinking about the idea of comfort, the like spaces and feel comfortable.
That's nice. Yeah.
More opportunities. So if you start to think about comfort as like a physical object, so like sometimes I hold comfort, right? I'm in a space where I speak a language that is accessible in that space. There are other people that are talking to me speak that language too.
Yeah.
Or my body is able to fit into this chair. That's like something that just is a comfort, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
To move the comfort around, and like, could we share the comfort with other people? If I'm somebody who can hear with my ears, if my ears work to do that, that's a comfort I'm holding, right? And someone who doesn't have that certain comfort. So I could get out of my comfort space and I could say, yeah, I could use a microphone, or we could communicate in another manner. And that means I'm sharing the discomfort with that other person. Or maybe giving them comfort for a moment where they might be centered in terms of what they need. And so when it comes to thinking about nature, it's also around like acknowledging the ways in which we feel more comfortable in a space than other people might feel. And that's not something that we necessarily earned. It's something that just because of the nature of our lives, because of the kind of exposure that we've had, that it has made more sense. Or because we haven't had a legacy of feeling like nature is a dangerous place, because it really was a dangerous place.
Right.
And from the wild animals out there, it was dangerous because of the threat to our bodies from other people, and like where we move and what space, so I think that's helped me a little bit as I've been talking about it. It's not just like it's a material thing. It's something that really matters in terms of how we interact with our environments, with each other. And so how can consider it? It's been the nuns and the family that took care of Rootsprings, which called other things before us, they had a group of folks who really were their champions and were regular and like people who love that land. And we love that they love that land, and we want them to continue to love the land, but we want to actually invite them to an opportunity where they take a different place in the circle. So if we're creating a circle, we're all in the circle, we want them still to be in the circle, but maybe not occupy the center of the circle. How can you use another place in the circle where you can celebrate other people coming to the space that you love? Or if you used to come for 3 weekends a year, maybe you only come for 2. And the last weekend, free up the calendar, or you gift Rootsprings an opportunity to gift that to another family that could then have a relationship with the space. So we want them in our circle. We love that they're part of the circle, but we might need them to be a little less loud, or a little less in the middle, a little less catered to, a little less centered as we go.
Erin, so I'm also like hearing you when I hear you speaking about this, because now it's so much more joyful for me, because it's one thing to read the work, but also now hear your aspects of it, because there's like a sense of nurturing that I get from your work. Because it's also like a meditativeness, like the book and the writings. There's like a meditative quality to it that kind of put me at ease to like think about these stories, like the depth of it. And I see that the works that you're writing and the space, this land, is like this nurturing, that people can be brought back to the land and feel, like you just said, welcomed. Like that's what nature's supposed to do. So you're like helping people be like, here's my hand. I'm reaching out to you to come on in and be a part of this in a way that's impactful for them, their families, and then so on. That ripple keeps going to benefit awareness. And I think that, like, that nurturing I feel from what you're saying and your words, there's just a meditativeness that's really beautiful. That
Thank you. Yeah,
just,
I like moving that way. That feels like it honors the caretakers in my
yeah,
family, the folks that I've learned about how to be a host with, how to be a husband.
Right.
yeah.
Right. Because that's a
Because I don't,
different role. Sorry,
yeah.
Jen.
No, I was just gonna say, because I don't feel like in this country we do a very good job at all at honoring our ancestors, wherever they came from, to really, like, I've been really intrigued by this concept, because in this country we're so bad at just getting to know our grandparents, great grandparents, and so on down the line. Like, we kind of like, oh, those are distant memories, but it's really deeply connected to who we are.
Yeah.
And the better off we are knowing who our ancestors are and where do they all come from and why,
Yep.
where.
Exactly. And some of that, everyone has a tie to some indigenous group of people, right? People are
Yes.
indigenous to some place,
Yeah.
and we can
Mhm.
honor the indigenous knowledges in our own lineage, our
Mm.
our own lines. And I think it's we maybe are moving too fast, or I don't know what it is, but I think that there is like value to slowing down and thinking about our relationship to history. And so, yeah, the objects in the book, some of them are personal to people. Some of them are their own family's photographs or their grandpa's tackle box. And some folks are, some pieces are, they're movement leaders or historical figures that feel like that we're in a lineage too. So I think we can think of lineage both as like a family tree, kind of
Mm.
looking at our family tree. Some folks, Black folks in our country, have less access to that information because they weren't seen as a group of people worth remembering, worth noting personal things about, right? So my great great grandfather's name is not on the census because it wasn't a priority for our country, because because they weren't landowners, that they be
Mhm.
named in the census, because they weren't born in a hospital, and they didn't matter to the local government what their names were and how
Right.
much they weighed. That sort of thing wasn't chronicled. So some groups of people have to do more imaginative work in order to connect.
Mhm.
And so that's been fun for me too, to think about the opportunities to infuse humanity into the places where, government and officials and people who keep track of libraries and what is stored there didn't have the capacity to infuse them with humanity. That makes sense.
Well, and that's an interesting thing about archival objects, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were having a conversation in our extended family on my husband's side and mine, and it was sort of like, why do we save things, right? Is the ability to save something itself kind of, and I'll go back to the word privilege, because if you don't have room or you don't own a home, there's nowhere to there's no there's no attic or garage to keep all that stuff, right? If you're constantly moving, or you don't have you're living in a small space, you can't carry these things around with you. And so then, do we lose those archival objects
Yeah, and
from those less fortunate? I don't know.
yeah, that's the story. That there's an example in my family that feels really really apt. I'm a mixed race person. My mom is white, and my mom's family is white, and my stepdad's white, and my little brother, I'm in a white family distinctly. The Black side of my family, there was a long period of time when we weren't in contact when I was a young person. And when I first reconnected with my Black side of my family, when I went to see them, which was an incredible experience, this awesome opportunity to meet many generations of my family. But I carried with me a photo album that my mom had kept safe since she was married to my dad, and for 20 years. And they didn't have record of their childhoods. They didn't have these documents that my mom was able to keep safe, in a lot of ways because of privilege, right? Because
Yeah.
she wasn't moving every year. There wasn't a house fire. There weren't, there was a place she could keep it that was safe and wouldn't get lost in that way. And so I think that that's just a little story that has to do with my family, but that is true for
Big
many,
story.
many people's families. And a lot of people take their objects and they gift them to a university, or if they're
Mm-hmm.
noteworthy enough, then a museum wants to hold them, or some
Mhm.
has the resources to hold them and say they're important, and to catalog them and let other people access them.
Mhm.
Also, issues around trust with institutions, right? I learned that
Sure.
the African American
Ah.
the Smithsonian Museum of African American history and culture, many of the objects, I think about half of the things that are on display there have been in personal collections, in family collections. They've been in someone's before they went there, because it's hard to know who to trust in terms of a museum or a university,
Sure.
because you don't have a relationship.
Right.
Who's going to keep
This
it safe? Who's going to honor
institution.
it? Who's going to put
Wow.
signage up that respects the people who are part of
Mhm.
creating it and keeping it? So yeah, the relationship to the archive is also a
That is
political.
so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it is. It's interesting. That museum is insane, like absolutely amazing. Like Jen, I don't know if you've been to DC, like incredible
Yeah.
experience and beautifully curated and so thoughtful. And yeah, so just sort of tying it back to the book a little bit more, because I think that's interesting. Just sort of, yeah, why do we have things? Why do we still have them
Mm-hmm.
to hand down? And even the ability to purchase an album,
Mm-hmm.
just something as simple as that, right? To purchase an album and then to be able to have the funds to take the photos, get them printed, to have the time to put them in there. Like we
Yeah.
just take a lot of things for granted. I'll speak for myself. We take for granted that I have a baby book, right? Or that I have,
Mm-hmm.
that's just not everybody's experience. So I think that's interesting. Is there, as we're sort of wrapping up, is there anything that surprised you in the anthologies?
Yeah.
I love your face.
I mean,
Like,
it's such an amazing
kinda.
book. But is there anything?
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with the ways that the essays started to talk to each other. Even though I was the only middle person between them. I loved once we figured out the order of the essays. I loved that Katie Robinson's essay is the last one, and it really invites us to think about the borders of nature. What are the boundaries of our definitions of nature? Is the supernatural that part of nature? Is, are the things that we fear part of nature and can teach us things? Is nature meant to teach us things? Do we have to be in a binary relationship with nature?
Yeah.
All those.
Right. Do we have to have an expectation that it's going to
Yeah.
change us, or can
Yeah,
it just be a moment?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how can we think about that colonial history of nature and the way that nature writing has grown out of that, and that it means that primarily the voices around nature that we've had have been white and male, and then white and female, but has to do with a particular sort of relationship with nature that has to do with what do we know, what areas are ours, what do we, it's about
It's a
planting.
conquering.
And so, yeah, it was nice to see throughout the whole collection that there was a sort of contemplation around personal relationship. And it wasn't all like nature is awesome. Nature is complicated.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is a
Absolutely.
very full faceted thing. Yeah. And I've loved, since it's been out, I've loved being in conversation about it. I've loved meeting students who are engaging with it in the classroom. I love to ask folks about their own relationships with nature and with the archive. Is there something that they are keeping sacred and keeping safe that can emphasize the significance of it
Beautiful.
for them? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's gorgeous.
Well,
I love it.
where can we find you and support your work? Obviously, Instagram. You're there. We'll put that in our show notes. And what are you working on that you could share? Like, what's next? Because obviously, we want everybody to pick up the book. It's phenomenal. A Darker Wilderness: Black Nature Writing from Soil to Stars, which I love that. From Soil to Stars. It's kind of like from sea to shining sea, but I really love that.
It took a while to get to the after the colon title, but
Yep.
yeah, I like it too. Well, we are working on a podcast that will be in
That's
conversations with the
great.
book. So each of the
Fantastic.
essays and the contributors to the book will be talking about the process of writing and digging in a little deeper. I think it'll be a nice component for teaching
Beautiful.
the book, so it can be a companion. And so yeah, look out for that. That'll be happening sometime in 2025. Yeah, I'd love if you wanted to sign up for our Rootsprings newsletter. If you go to rootspringsmn.org, you can follow what we're up to.
Perfect.
Yeah, we have I don't know when this podcast comes out, but we have a wish list. So if you and your family are thinking about how to give back to an organization, you can buy it for another, to live at Rootsprings, but maybe it's a pair of snowshoes or it's a fishing pole that can give
Love
out
it.
who are coming to the land. So
That's
Oh, that's
beautiful.
fantastic. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll make sure to put all this in our show notes. So we'll make sure it's all there for everyone to go ahead and click on and be an active member of your community as well. And Erin, thank you so much. I mean, this has been, I wish we could speak longer with you.
I know.
But
I want to give
I'll
you
make
a
sure
hug.
we
I want
follow
you in
you
person.
everywhere. I know. I
You're
want
going to have
people
to come
find
to
out.
Georgia or New York.
New York
Yeah,
City.
I'd love to. Let's link up some other time. Thanks so much for having me, and it's been
Our pleasure, Erin. Thank you so much.
awesome.
Jen, she was so amazing and so fun to talk to. I really do want her to I really want more of her. She just was thoughtful. I don't know. I heard everything about her.
Monica, I'm so glad. First of all, I'm so glad we all got to get her on the show. I'm so thankful for our producer, Katrina, that really secured her because she's so thoughtful and that the book is so intentional. And I was really just moved by the book's concept of really that our land is really so historic and that there's so many ancestral stories that really go back to people that moved the land, that really structured the land in ways that we've overlooked, and that we have to honor the people that were here before us, because that's how we know where we came from, and that's where that strength comes from.
Yeah, and just the complicated relationship with land, that everybody has a different relationship with land, right? Again, and then the thought of ownership, or who can own it, how you own it, what that relationship is. I hear a lot in sort of the agriculture world, so many people want to farm, but they just don't have the money to buy the land. And so there's some cool groups that are trying to make that connection to a landowner and a farmer that eventually could be a, lease or rent to own. But I thought that was great of well, what does it mean to own, to have a relationship with land? That was one of the things that really struck me.
Because we think about that too. I think about all of our ancestors before. No one ever thought about land ownership. You can't own the land. I mean, we think about when, this was hundreds of years ago, there's no land ownership. It was just people were able to provide themselves with land, with the fruits of that space.
No, people were nomadic.
Yeah.
And so their culture wasn't about ownership. It was about
honoring the land.
Really. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I love, by the way, the museum and the glass and the poem. And she's afraid of birds. She's the fear. I love it so much.
That's hilarious. We're going to put that I'll put that in the show notes, because I just happened to pop on there before we got on. And I was like, this was the coolest thing ever. So another thing that really struck me is the word comfort. When we started talking about privilege, I thought comfort was interesting, and how she said comfort as an object, that you can hold space for comfort. You can have comfort where you're sitting in a comfortable chair, but that how do you share comfort with others? I don't know. I really like that. I really like that. Me
too. I never thought about, again, this is I'm so thankful that we have these beautiful conversations that lead to hope. And wow, I didn't think about comfort in that way, of that invitation to be at ease in a place that maybe I didn't feel before. It's beautiful. She's really beautiful.
And then gifting that comfort. How can we give people that comfort, whether that's through access, or I really liked how her retreat center, you can gift a stay or even a pair of boots. We should be thinking more about that in this world. So I don't know, Jen, I loved it. I could have talked to her for another hour.
Me too. So yeah, we're very thankful that she was with us. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the conversation as well.
Yeah. All right, Jen, talk to you in a few weeks.
Bye, Monica.
Thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the podcast, we would love for you to follow us on our favorite listening app. Give us a 5-star rating, and please leave us a review.
Listens, follows, and reviews really go such a long way and help us share these amazing interviews and solutions with a wider network.
Absolutely. And we'll be back with another great guest in a few weeks.